Good afternoon. Bonjour. It is Canada's great honor to have President Zelenskyy visit us here today. Thank you for coming, Volodymyr. We stand here absolutely united in our defense of democracy and our condemnation of Vladimir Putin's unprovoked, unjustified, and unconscionable invasion of Ukraine.
I've discussed in person today with President Zelenskyy during our tête-à-tête. We've also had a cabinet meeting. We discussed military needs, financial needs, and humanitarian needs for Ukraine today and for the future.
At each meeting, Canada was clear, as we always are, that we will stand with Ukraine with whatever it takes for as long as it takes. And today, we're backing up this commitment with further support. We are shifting our approach to provide multi-year assistance, ensuring Ukraine has the predictable support it needs for long-term success. As part of this approach, I'm announcing $650 million in new military assistance over the next 3 years to supply Ukraine with 50 armored vehicles, including armored medical evacuation vehicles that will be built by Canadian workers in London, Ontario. We will also contribute pilot and maintenance instructors to the Joint Coalition F-16, as well as support for Leopard 2 tank maintenance. We
will also provide Ukraine with 35 drones equipped with high-resolution cameras and support services, as well as light vehicles and ammunition based on NATO standards. Earlier this week, Minister Blair confirmed that Canada will provide a financial contribution to the consortium led by the United Kingdom to deliver air defense equipment to Ukraine.
Ukraine's resilience to date has been remarkable, but their economy continues to need support so that it can withstand this invasion, so that government has the resources it needs to continue to provide services to its people, so that it has the long-term certainty to plan and coordinate assistance effectively, and so that when Ukraine is victorious, it will continue to be a strong and prosperous country. That is why I am today confirming that we will again provide substantial macroeconomic support to Ukraine in the 2024 fiscal year.
We've just signed a free trade agreement that supports the economic development of Ukraine and provides Canadian companies privileged access that will create jobs. And later today, I will head with Volodymyr to meet with leaders from the business world. We will discuss how the private sector can support efforts by Ukraine and already participate in rebuilding the country.
Meanwhile, we're continuing to impose costs on Russia and ensuring that those responsible for this illegal, unjustifiable invasion do not benefit from it. First, Canada and Ukraine have agreed to engage with G7 partners to establish a working group of eminent persons who will provide advice on the seizure and forfeiture of Russian assets, including of the Russian Central Bank. Second, we're adding another 63 Russian individuals and entities to our sanctions list, including those complicit in the kidnapping of children and the spreading of disinformation.
All of Ukrainian society needs support. To support civil society, we will assist local NGOs and assist the Ukrainian Parliament in improving its cyber resilience. To assist communities, we are also supporting the rebuilding of local infrastructure, and we are helping farmers who have been disturbed by Putin's actions.
To preserve the memory of victims of the Holodomor, Canada is prepared to contribute to the Holodomor Museum in Ukraine once appropriate arrangements are in place, and to help all affected Ukrainians. We're providing funding to make mental health support more available, because the toll this is taking on the well-being of citizens, even those not on the front lines, can never be understated. Évidemment,
of course, it will not be possible to rebuild before peace is reestablished. As I said in Parliament today, and as I said at the UN Security Council this week, this peace must not be a false peace based on compromises that reward the aggressor. We must have lasting peace, respecting the UN Charter, respecting international law, to restore territorial integrity to Ukraine.
it was powerful to hear President Zelenskyy speak to parliamentarians today. And this evening, he will again speak, this time directly to Canadians, including Ukrainian Canadians, at an event in Toronto. Over 1.4 million Canadians have Ukrainian roots, but this war has made all of us as Canadians connected to Ukraine. This country has seen an incredible outpouring of support that is unique in the way that it comes from all corners of society, from the diaspora, from different orders of government, from different charities, and from across the Canadian public. Because your fight is our fight. These new announcements we have made build on nearly $9 billion of support since this full-scale invasion began, build on years of support through initiatives like Operation Unifier that has trained up tens of thousands of Ukrainian fighters, and a list of 2,700 individuals or entities that we have sanctioned since Putin illegally occupied Crimea in 2014. Canada's support for Ukraine is unequivocal and always will be. And Volodymyr, I have to say that the steadfastness and the strength of your leadership, of your compassion, and of how you have inspired not just Ukrainians, not just Canadians, but people all around the world to look at what they can do concretely to continue to stand up for what is right, continue to stand is an inspiration to us all, including to me, my dear friend. So thank you very much. We will continue to stand with you as long as it takes. Yes.
I thank you, Justin, my dear friend, Prime Minister, fellow guests, members of government, and journalists. Today, I, together with my First Lady of Ukraine, together with my team, have arrived to Canada in order to personally say thank you for all the support provided to the Ukrainians. At times of war and at different other times, the people of Ukraine are receiving only respect from the Canadians, only the desire to help, only the trust. So please know that we are greatly appreciating this support, and Ukraine shall always remember that. And when we will gain victory, and we will be victorious, you have to know this is going to be our common victory with the Canada, with all the partners, with all the friends, with the whole free world. That is free because there's nations that are protecting the freedom and life with dedication. It was an honor for me to address the Parliament of Canada. I thank you. This is already my second statement, but today it was offline, like face-to-face, and we are very grateful that all the parties, all the parliament are supporting us. We had also a very fruitful meeting with the General Governor of Canada, and surely we have a very fruitful negotiations with Justin. I'm very grateful to you, and the Prime Minister, together with his strong team, has being always supporting us and assisting us. We have a very good agreements. Our defensive cooperation since the start of the full-scale aggression was very effective. Canada has provided us assistance for over 8 billion Canadian dollars. There's houses, armored vehicles, ammunition, firearms. Canada has trained over 40,000 of Ukrainian soldiers under the framework of the Unifier operation. I'd like to specially outline Canadian leadership in the humanitarian demining. This is very important for Ukrainians because around a third part of the territory of Ukraine are contaminated with the unexploded ordnance. These are the leftovers of the Russian shelling. This is an enormous amount of work that we would need to do in order to clean our territory from the mines. But I'm confident that together with the Canadian support, we shall be implementing and fulfilling those tasks. We highly appreciate the decision of the Canada to join the training program for F-16 pilots. I thank you, Justin. We have discussed in a detailed manner on the air defense. I've expressed gratitude for the procurement of additional missiles for air defense systems. This is a very timely decision, as a lot of missiles and Iranian drones are being used against our civilian infrastructure, against our people. Today we have received a new package of defense support. This was already mentioned by Justin, the armored vehicles as well as armored medical evacuation vehicles. This is something that we highly need for our wounded heroes. We have discussed our cooperation in the field of military industry and the joint production of the weaponry. We're expecting for the participation of the Ukrainian companies in the first forum of defense industries that will be held in Ukraine very soon. Then we've reinforced our economic cooperation. We have signed the renewed or updated free trade agreement. This will serve as the foundation for the renovation. Canada is one of our largest donors and very grateful for the decision to continue the support to Ukraine. What's important is ready and continues with further sanctions pressure against the aggressor, so that the aggressor would not be able to fund the aggression. Then we have discussed different aspects of the peace formula. That includes justice and the accountability for the damages caused by Russia to Ukraine as the result of this aggression. I'm grateful to Canada for supporting our work on the organization of the Global Peace Formula Summit, and I'm very grateful for the leadership to work on the security guarantees for Ukraine until the joining with NATO. Our teams are working on a bilateral documents of security guarantees. One other very important thing, the Ukrainian community in Canada. I'm very grateful to all of its members. I'm very grateful that the Ukrainians in Canada, Ukrainian culture in Canada are always at the same level together with other cultures and other languages of other minorities. The equality and respect to the other communities is an important characteristic of your country. This will always stay like that. I'm very grateful. Let us have the victory as soon as possible. Let us have our common victory. Slava Ukraini, Ukraine.
Minister, President Zelenskyy will be taking 2 questions from the Canadian media, 2 questions from the Ukrainian media.
We will take 2 questions from Canadian media, 2 questions from the Ukrainian media. We will begin with
Anupchenko.
Mr. Prime Minister, Pane President, I got a question for both of you. You will be likely agree that the most significant way Canada can help Ukraine is to guarantee security as long as the war continues, and to help in achieving a just peace. So, Mr. Trudeau, do you already know which security guarantees Canada will be able to provide to Ukraine? And for the peace plan, which steps of President Zelensky's peace formula does Canada support? Пане Президенте, зважаючи і на рівень відносин.
Mr. President, considering the level of cooperation and your personal cooperation with the Prime Minister, what are your expectations of the support of Canada to your peace formula as well as the security guarantees for Ukraine?
Thank you very much. First of all, on the security guarantees, Canada is stepping up today to announce the kind of multi-year support that is a concrete embodiment of what we've been saying since the very beginning, which is that Canada will stand with Ukraine with whatever it takes for as long as it takes. This is not just because Canada and Ukraine are historical friends, that we have deep people-to-people ties, or even that Volodymyr and I are great friends in person. It's because this is the right thing to do. Ukraine is standing up and fighting and dying for the rules-based order that protects all of us. It is in Canadians' interests to ensure that Ukraine wins this war, that Russia does not win this war. The impacts that we're feeling, whether it's on food and grocery prices or fuel prices, have been deeply negatively impacted for families from coast to coast to coast, and indeed around the world by this war. And that's why we will continue to stand with Ukraine with whatever it takes for as long as it takes. When it comes to the peace process, we fully support the peace process. And the biggest challenge we have is understanding that we can't pick all of them to lead on. We have to pick just a few, and we're in conversations with that. One of the ones that we are very much looking at is how we can support around displaced persons and the abduction of children. That's something that Canada has, obviously, when it comes to migration and welcoming 175,000 Ukrainians and counting, an example of a place where we can show leadership on this issue around the world.
I thank you for your question. Good afternoon. First, as for the security guarantees, this is a very strong bilateral document that was mentioned at the Vilnius summit, at the G7 countries summit, and there will be a separate bilateral document with every country on security guarantees. We clearly understand what those guarantees are, because we are at war, we are at tests. So this is a security guarantees, both military and humanitarian guarantees, the reinforcement of the Ukrainian armed forces in order not to have any other attempt of any aggression by any other aggressor. Now we're talking about Russia. We are talking about the strong protection in the air and at sea. We know the areas that are usually used by the aggressor. That is the energy sector, which is also very important, and it's combined with the reinforcement of air defense. Surely you are perfectly aware of this. The protection of the energy, the protection of the infrastructure, of critical infrastructure. There's many other aspects. Then there are a number of preventive sanctions, a list of sanctions that shall be imposed against certain aggressor in case of the aggression. The teams are working, and the reason I've said about the different agreements, because you know that there are countries who can provide weapons, then there are countries who are ready to talk about the humanitarian assistance simply because they don't have a powerful armed forces or the ability to produce weaponry. That is why there will be separate agreements with separate country. That is why the G7 countries, they are top priority, because these are the powerful countries that are able to provide the strong security guarantees. As for the peace formula, the most important task is to make sure that all the peaceful negotiations would remain focused. So we are the victim and Russia is the aggressor. We are under attack. The war is in Ukraine. That is why it is absolutely fair that the format of the peace formula was offered by Ukraine, a country which is defending its independence and fighting for its life. We have suggested a number of aspects, and we are currently working on the organization of the inauguration summit. And the big task for us is to make sure there will be as many countries from different continents as possible engaged into the formula, because that would mean that Russia in its aggression is left on itself, and there is a political isolation of the Russian Federation. This is very important. Then, on the basis of the first inauguration summit, our security advisors and diplomatic representatives will start working at different platforms on each point of the peace formula separately. There are countries who will be joining all the points. There are countries who are ready to support only certain points, and that is absolutely normal. For us, it is important to have as many countries as possible engaged. Then, all of these points will be submitted to the leaders of the nations.
Kevin Gallagher.
President Zelenskyy, did President Biden send Ukraine long-range Army tactical missile systems? And for both leaders, how concerned are you about divisions in U.S. Congress, NATO allies like Poland pulling military support for Ukraine and getting Ukraine the support it needs? Prime Minister, in French and English, please, and what can Canada do in that respect with allies?
Подібне того, excuse me, can you repeat the second part of your question? The first was about the weapon.
Correct.
And the United States. And the second part, can you repeat this?
Sure, no problem. How concerned are you with divisions in U.S. Congress, with some recent divisions amongst NATO allies like Poland, in terms of getting Ukraine the military aid it needs as quickly as it needs? And I'm wondering if you think Canada can play a role to encourage allies.
Дякую.
Thank you. We are grateful to the United States. And with all due respect to all of our allies, United States provide the largest share of assistance, and the assistance that our soldiers on the battlefield, on the front line, really need at this moment. So we are discussing all the different types of weapons, long-range weapons and artillery shells with a caliber of 155 millimeters, then air defense systems. Therefore, we have a comprehensive discussion and the work with the United States at different levels. We have cooperation at the level of security advisors, at the level of ministers of defense, and at our level, that's a separate bilateral kind of relations at the level of presidents. I believe that the majority of what has been discussed yesterday with President Biden, I think, will be able to reach the agreements. Yes, it is a matter of time. Not everything depends on Ukraine. There's different processes, I have to say, frankly. The sooner, the less people will lose. This is the fact. As for the assistance to Ukraine, we are working with all the states. I understand that Russia, on its side, is spreading disinformation, it's spreading its narratives all around the place. It works with the societies. It's trying to influence the politicians, the public institutions, with different political parties, different NGOs, with many from different countries of the world. They are working very hard. They are investing billions into that. This is a fact. This is in order to divide Europe, divide the United States, and divide the whole world. They have a significant influence. They keep influencing the African continent. They constantly working with Latin American countries. Well, they're spending a lot of efforts, a lot of attention, a lot of money for that. It's hard to tackle that. That is why the long war, that is why they're working long on that. Our task as Ukraine, and this is something that I would like to address to our Canadian friends and to you journalists, you are the weapons capable of uniting the society. And just as today we've talked with Justin about this, I really want the Prime Minister to help us with that. I'm confident that he can do that, because Canada has powerful relationship with many countries of the world. We cannot let Russia divide the opinions in the world. They are doing that. Now, if the opinions will be divided, if the unity will be broken, this powerful unity that we've managed to acquire in the beginning of the war, then there could be no support for Ukraine. That's a fact.
As you all know, Canada has been very, very active in supporting Ukraine directly with humanitarian support, military support, financial and economic support. But we've also been very, very active on the world stage. Canada is one of the most interconnected countries in the world, members of the G7, of the G20, the Commonwealth, the Organization of American States, of La Francophonie, of APEC, of so many different gatherings in which we have been unequivocal in standing not just up for Ukraine and encouraging others to stand alongside us, but in ensuring that people understood that this is not just a matter of a war in Eastern Europe that might not matter to people across the global south, but it is a contract that does matter around the world. Yes, because of food prices, because of energy prices, because of the geopolitical instability that Russia is creating with its illegal invasion, but also because the matter of sovereignty, of territorial integrity, of the rule of law must and does matter to all countries around the world. So Canada has been incredibly active alongside Ukraine in all the moments where Volodymyr has appeared at various summits to stand up for Ukraine and stand up for the rule of law, but also in summits like the most recent G20 where Volodymyr wasn't able to be joining us. Canada spoke clearly and strongly and worked to convene partners. We will do this because we are a country that always stands up against the rule of law. And as Volodymyr said, the propaganda, the misinformation, the disinformation that Russia is aggressively spreading throughout our democracies is something that we have to counter with facts, with values, and with the kind of strength and solidarity that will see us through these difficult times.
Canada has always been there for Ukraine. At the bilateral level, we're there with military assistance, humanitarian assistance, financial assistance, but we are also there on the world stage, standing up unequivocally for Ukraine's sovereignty, but also the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity that are essential to the proper functioning of all of our countries. We have and we will continue to be there to underline how much this conflict impacts us all. We must all stand by the UN Charter, law and order, and stability and prosperity that the world has known for 75 years, that has been broken by Russia and its illegal actions. Canada will continue to be there for Ukraine and for the rule of law.
Thank you. Next question, Maxim.
Okay, Prime Minister, Mr. President, thank you for taking the questions. So I also have a question for both of you. So for the Prime Minister, are you concerned that the recent published report by the American Department of the Treasury ranks Canada 8th in the world regarding the number of suspected Russian evasions by local companies? Will the regime be strengthened in order to deter this type of activity? And for the President,
recently, some of the Western partners mentioned the need for running elections in Ukraine in accordance to the terms, and the Constitution prohibits the elections during the martial law period. Do you have any pressure from Canada on the need to have elections next year, and whether the Canada is ready to support that?
Canada is one of the countries that has stepped up the quickest and the most comprehensively on sanctioning those responsible for this illegal war, Putin and all his cronies and the people who've profited from it, whether they be in Russia or Belarus or elsewhere. We will continue. We've sanctioned about 2,700 people and entities, and we will continue to. We are constantly working to strengthen, to coordinate with our allies to make sure that these sanctions have the right impact on the people responsible for this war, while ensuring that they are not harming people in the global south who are facing food insecurity or energy insecurity. That is the role that Canada continues to play, to highlight that Russia is and is responsible alone for the food and energy crisis that so many people around the world are facing right now. Le Canada est parmi
Canada is one of the strongest countries in terms of sanctions against the Russians and others who are involved, who are profiting from this illegal war. We will, of course, continue to work with our allies, with our partners, to ensure that these sanctions hit as hard as possible, while ensuring that we are not hurting the most vulnerable around the world who are suffering because of this war by Russia, especially in terms of the price of food and energy.
Thank you for the question. First, Canada is not pressing, and we have a warm relationship, really. You should not press. You can raise the issue, but not press. Secondly, the team of the Prime Minister, we haven't raised the issue of elections because it's not topical issue considering the security aspects. You were right to mention that the law prohibits the elections at the time of the martial law period, but I'm ready. But the security is a very complicated aspect of running the elections. The first complexity is to have the elections in a democratic and transparent manner. For that, we need independent observers from different countries of the world. How it's usually done in Ukraine in a democratic and transparent manner, just as it was during the previous elections. Now, the second question, how to give a chance to vote for the people located on the temporarily occupied territories. I'm not talking about the territories occupied in 2014. I'm talking about those territories that were occupied after the 24th of February. Now, this is a complicated matter. We need to think of that. Then third, a lot of Ukrainians, not hundreds, thousands, but millions of Ukrainians are abroad. And how to organize the voting process for them? It's a difficult matter from the standpoint of infrastructure. And at this point, there is no answer at that. As for the funding, we are currently saying that in Ukraine, which is absolutely fair, the society is responding harsh whenever the parliament or the government is willing to, to allocate money to a certain direction, which is different from weapons. I mean, the society is not ready to support that. And the society is, in fact, is absolutely against that because we are at war. And everyone thinks, what sort of elections are you kind of thinking about? But this topic is raised, so we need to get ready, to be ready for this topic. And the last, but not the least, I think the largest complication, it's the military, because we have 1 million of soldiers. And, I mean, how they're going to vote while in the trenches, how they will be able to visit the polling stations close to the front line. So everything should be organized in the bomb shelters. We know Russia, because they will simply open fire at all the people who would be coming to the elections. And, I mean, will you be able to find the observers ready to go to the trenches and to make sure there is a transparent elections? Unfortunately, we don't have an online voting in Ukraine. Now, speaking on military, you have to understand this is the largest kind of unfairness, because the people who are protecting the rights and liberties of the citizens won't have a chance to vote. I mean, that's nonsense. Therefore, we have to think about this. We have to, if everything will succeed, then we can do the elections.
Bonjour. Good on you for putting the thingy, because I'm going to ask the question in French. All good? French skills in the Parliament, but a bit more complex in here.
Mr. Trudeau, Canada has announced $650 additional million. That's $9 billion since the beginning of the war. We've seen resistance at Congress in the U.S. yesterday. Do you feel that there's a little bit of fatigue setting in, that it's become more difficult to convince people to continue to stand by Ukraine. And Mr. Zelenskyy, could I hear you on that as well? And while I'm at it, Mr. Trudeau, on India, you asked India to collaborate in the investigation. They said they haven't received anything yet. When will you provide the evidence to them? Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. First, we all understand that this is an economically difficult time. Canadians, I'll start over. We all know that we are experiencing economically difficult times around the world. Crises have multiplied. Following the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and Russia's illegal invasion, which has destabilized prices, the impact of climate change, we are facing very difficult times. That is why Canada, like other countries, is there to help our people, to help people get through these difficult times. But we understand that global challenges have global solutions. So that is why we are part of a group standing firm against Russia to defend Ukraine. We know that the destabilization of the global order that would happen if Russia succeeded in overthrowing the rules-based order would have a profound economic impact for people. That is why we are doing both things at the same time. We are there for Ukraine because it is the right thing to do for Ukrainians, but also because it is the right thing to do for Canadians. And we are there for Canadians at the same time. I understand that in all countries around the world, there are more and more complex budgetary situations. That is why we are looking at ways to directly help Ukraine with money from Russia. The Central Bank of Russia has $200 to $300 billion in assets, mainly in Europe and the United States. But today we've announced a working group to look at how we can use that money, put it to work to help Ukrainians who are suffering because of Russia. So we will continue to be innovative, to be present in standing up for Ukraine, and we will also be resolute that it is in the economic interest of Canada and even Canadians to continue to be present with everything it takes for as long as it takes so that Russia is not victorious.
Okay. We know this is a difficult time right now for all Canadians, for people around the world. The impact of climate change and extreme weather events, the hangover from the pandemic, and indeed the direct impact on food prices and energy prices linked to Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, means that people are having a hard time. And that's why we're stepping up as a country to support our citizens, but that's also why we recognize that global problems have global solutions. And we will continue to be there to ensure that Russia does not emerge victorious. Because the impact a Russian victory, which isn't just a victory over Ukraine, but would be an overthrowing of the rules-based order that has led to unprecedented prosperity and opportunity for people around the world over 75 years. If Russia were to win, Canadians in their daily lives, in their grocery bills, in the opportunities they have for the future, would be directly impacted. So we will continue to be there with as much as it takes for as long as it takes. But that's also, this financial context is why we are looking very carefully at how we can ensure that Russia itself is paying for the devastation they're causing in Ukraine. We've announced today a working group we'll look to create to see if things like Russian central bank assets, which total $200 or $300 billion in Europe and in the United States primarily, could be set to actually support Ukraine in this fight and indeed help over the long term to restore the prosperity and peace for the people of Ukraine.
Thank you for the question. I believe the Prime Minister has covered all the details for your question. I don't think I will be able to complement his answer, but some of the aspects very briefly. I believe that you're supporting either Ukraine or Russia. There's no mediators in this war. By weakening the support of Ukraine, you're reinforcing Russia and powerful Russia. And what can you expect of it? I think the history and the historic books and the witnesses has gave all the answers necessary. That's it. If someone wants to take a risk, okay. Now, weaken the support to Ukrainians, but should I be absolutely frank, in case of freedom, democracy, and human rights, you need to fight for those. That's a fact. And money. Yes, we are grateful to all the countries who have been helping us with weapons, with money, and who continues to do so. But this is not the most important. The most important is that the largest price. This is something that Ukraine is paid because we are paying with the lives of our people. So we are grateful for your support. Thank you.
I was thinking I missed the part of the question on India. I just want to simply say that we've shared those allegations, those credible allegations, with India for weeks. We are working with our partners, and what we are asking is for India to commit constructively with Canada to establish the facts on this situation. We're there to work with them, and we have been for weeks now.
In regards to India, Canada has shared the credible allegations that I talked about on Monday with India. We did that many weeks ago, and we are there to work constructively with India, and we hope that they engage with us so that we can get to the bottom of this very serious matter. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui conclut la conférence.
Thank you. This concludes our conference.